Welcome back to Unsolicited Advice, brought to you by Toxic Bubblegum. I'm Bubblegum.
I'm Toxic.
And today we're talking about sequels.
AKA the Randy Meeks special.
Yeah.
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 Yes.
Yes. That's what Kat's calling it. I guess that's what we're calling it.
That's going to be my recurring tie back throughout the episode. So everyone look forward to that.
Well, I guess I don't have to plan a title then. That makes this convenient for me.
Nice.
I like that.
Good.
I guess I should pull up the notes.
Probably.
Shouldn't I?
We're opening up a quote.
By the one and only Randy Meeks.
Yeah.
From Scream 2.
Scream 2. Our sequel expert, if you will. There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to create a successful sequel.
So you seem to have some familiarity with a certain sequel, at the very least.
Yes. Scream 2, for those of you who don't know, is one of my all-time favorite sequels. 92% on Rotten Tomatoes after
That's absurd.
many years.
Actually, that is one of the highest scores.
It's one of
frankly
the
for
highest
a sequel overall.
For a sequel overall, and for just about any horror movie. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Rotten Tomatoes, they're not kind to horror movies in most cases. But Scream 2 is 92%. I think also is what Cabin in the Woods.
Oh yeah, so that's right up there.
Off at that. It's good. So yeah.
Cool. So I figured we'd talk about sequels. I don't know why. I just thought sequels would be a cool thing to talk about. Sequels are everywhere, always happening.
Yeah.
Very true. But it's fun because there's like, I feel like there's like three types of sequels.
Alright.
There's the planned sequel, which is where a story is in like 2 to 3 parts, where basically the story intends itself to go longer than one installment.
Right.
So there's those. There's the sequel that's not intended, but builds upon the story, like in a good way, and like, you know,
which is like what Ellen Hopkins does. She has made a statement where she like never plans sequels for her books, but sometimes she knows how to continue a story, and that's the only time she writes them.
Right. And then there's the cash grab sequel, which is it made money, so they're gonna do it again.
Yes.
And those are the ones that I feel like get the most attention a lot of the times because they're primarily negative and people like to complain.
Right.
I am one of those people. I like to complain.
We're going to be doing a lot of complaining today.
We're going to be doing a lot of... Well, I mean, that just sort of happens when we're talking about things.
Yes.
We're complainy people. I'm a complainy people. I don't know about you, but I know you are, actually. So, a bam. So, yes. Those are sort of the... Like, it's not like an official category or anything. That's just sort of how I've always seen sequels. Is they sort of split into those three.
I would also say that there is this is somewhere in between continuing a story and cash grab. I'd also argue that like fan sequels deserve their own subcategory, and just to be clear, this isn't fan fiction. This is where the fans band together enough to the point that the story is continued by the creators.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So it's not like, and like I said, it falls kind of in between those two things, because they're usually not, there's something to be said for the fans being invested enough for something like that to happen, as opposed to just the creator wanting to continue the story on their own. Right.
There's sort of a middle ground there.
Yeah.
And that can be a very, very tricky category, and it can make some people very mad. Rebellion is one of those.
Rebellion, yeah.
Madoka Rebellion, and if anyone's listened to me talk about Rebellion before, you know how much I fucking hate it, because it just sucks.
And I hate to pile on more negativity. Also Saw 4. Which
that makes sense.
I'm going to be talking about Saw a lot later.
All the Saw... I guess when we're talking about sequels, we can sort of talk about anything that's past the first installment.
Yeah.
Really. Because that's what I always hear. Because, like, because you call it, like, the Saw sequels. Like,
yeah.
Even though, in theory, I guess sequel means the second one.
Yeah.
But usually any continuation of something, is a sequel.
Yeah.
Unless we're talking about, like, comic books, which come in issues, in which case, like, comics don't really have sequels. If they're done in issues, it's, like, the entire arc is, like, everything in that arc is subdivided into those issues.
Yeah.
So, an arc can have a sequel, but, like, issue 1 is not inherently a sequel to issue 2 is not inherently a sequel to issue 1.
Yeah.
That's how it works. That's words. That's words for you. That's words for you.
Sequel in the colloquial term does apply in the industry, does apply to any installation after the first one.
So,
yeah.
Official words. Those words for you. So,
that's actually a good segue into one of the talking points I wanted to cover, which is sequels in different forms of media.
Because it turns out there's a lot.
Because, like you were saying, sequels work differently in comics than they do in other formats.
Right.
It's also worth noting that I feel like book sequels tend to be a lot more successful.
Yeah.
Than movie sequels.
Yeah. So let's go through, like, one time. So, movie sequels are probably the ones most people are familiar with.
Yes.
And I feel like most movie sequels fall into the cash grab category.
Yes, a lot of them do.
Because the thing is, with a book, even if it's, like, a sequel to, like, a big book, it's usually a passion project.
Right.
Like, because, like, an author is sitting down and working it and crafting it.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's like, so they have to put in a lot of time and their energy, whereas when a, like, studio does it, like, there's a bunch of people in suits and ties and big fancy office chairs that are like, we're gonna make this, we're gonna give you the money, do it.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't have the time or the effort put into it.
Right.
That, like, other ones do. Like, books would.
Yes. In movies, I want to talk a little bit about James Wan, because he has some really interesting takes on sequels. For those of you who don't know, he is a horror director. He's very famous for the first Saw movie and for Insidious, which I am not, don't quote me on the last Insidious installation, but I know that he handled at least the first 2 Insidious sequels. Like, he stayed with that one. But his belief is that the only reason that sequels happen is because the fans are such a big fan of the original.
Right.
And this would apply to passion projects and the cash grab, both equally. One of the reasons why he did Insidious was because he felt like Saw went in a direction that he didn't want it to go, starting with Saw 2.
Yeah, that's fair.
He wanted that to be, like, he wouldn't have taken it in that direction, and so when he signed on for Insidious, he stuck with Insidious so that if there were more installations, he could direct the way that the story went, which I think is really interesting. That being said, my 2 favorite Saw movies are actually 3 and 2.
Yeah. They're very good.
Saw, I think, was the most underrated of all of them, but 2 and 3 were pretty much my favorites. They were taken by one of my other favorite horror directors, Darren Lynn Bousman, and he took it on as a passion project because he loved Saw. And that really shows in 2 and 3, because even though it wasn't where the original director wanted the franchise to go, it added to the story brilliantly. They all tied together, they continued the story. They're pretty much exactly what I would like for sequels to be. He also directed Saw 4, which I've already complained about briefly, but that's a good...
Drop the ball on that one.
Darren Lynn Bousman, when he took on the project, he intended for there to be 3 Saw movies. He wanted it to be a trilogy. He wanted to turn Saw into the Saw trilogy. And you can really tell with the planning that was his intention. It's good. It ties up enough of the loose ends that you have a story, but there's still kind of some hook left. And because there was that hook left, fans got really insistent for Saw 4. A lot of the Saw 4 traps were fan designed or fan design inspired.
I didn't know about that.
The fandom really took up for the fourth Saw movie, and the story is really good if you spend enough time trying to dig it out. The execution is where Saw 4 really failed, and I think a big part of it is that the director hadn't wanted it, and it shows.
Wasn't it like just like this year or last year that you figured out? Was it Saw 4 or Saw 5? Was the one like you figured out how everything worked?
Yeah, it was. I had been watching. I think it was like a couple years ago. I think, but it was more than a decade into the franchise before I finally got all of the bits and pieces that were going on in Saw 4.
You texted me about it. You were like, Alan, I figured it out. I figured out what Saw 4 is doing. And I was like, huh?
Yeah.
I forgot watching that one.
Yeah. It's something. And it's things like that get, I'm gonna talk about horror as a genre a lot today, even though I'll be touching on other stuff, and part of it is just because I like talking about it, but horror tends to get the best and the worst of the sequel world. It's very, very hit or miss as a genre anyway, and sequels are also very hit or miss, so like horror sequels
is a very particular category of things.
Yeah. And it's one of the reasons why I'm going to be talking about Scream 2 so much today, because I think if you're going to be... I always talk about self-awareness as a creator, and it's a very self-aware franchise. Saw 2 was the most self-aware, because it picked on sequels as much as the horror genre.
So, like, it was sort of about double whammy for the horror sequel shenanigans things.
And it's why we're going to be talking about Randy so much in this one, because he as a character was, the first one, you could tell that the writers were aware of the horror tropes and they worked them in a way that was amusing. In Scream 2, Randy's the, like, very self-aware character who knows that he's in a horror sequel as it's happening.
Of course.
And can avoid those pitfalls. And it took it to, like, a new level of satire without losing any of the thrill, which I think is why it is remembered as fondly today as it is.
We will also be talking about another Randy who we play tabletop games with. Randy's here.
Oh, nice.
He's right here. He's over there.
He's being about as loud as always.
He's being Belthor today. It's all good. Randy. I had to get into a Randy joke. That was good. Yeah. It's great if people don't listen to Adventures.
Because no one knows who the fuck Randy is.
Yeah, no one knows who the fuck Randy is, and this is the second time we've mentioned him on a podcast.
I think it might be more, actually.
We may have mentioned him more times on this podcast. This is a podcast he doesn't even know about. Randy, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway.
Yeah. So that was my movie thing. For the most part, I do think there are a lot of sequels. There's also, since we're still on different forms of media, I guess it should also be said that some movie sequels are... It's one of those things, like, there are a lot of different stories to explore sometimes, and you can appreciate that, but if you have too much of anything, some of them will suffer in quality.
Yeah.
MCU is a great example of this, because there are too many Marvel movies.
There are so many.
We're at the point where there are just too many, and... It's hard because some of the newer ones are ones that I wouldn't trade, and I understand that we had to have all of the ones that got to this point. But there have been a lot that it was hard to sit through, and there are so many.
There's so many. I can't keep track of all the superhero movies.
Like, I wouldn't trade Infinity War. I wouldn't trade Thor Ragnarok. No one else liked it, but I wouldn't trade Iron Man 3. But it does mean sitting through Iron Man 2.
Yeah,
And
I was gonna say
Civil
that's the
War,
one.
And
oh god, Civil War.
Age of Ultron.
The problem is Civil War gave us Black Panther. Oh.
Right. So when you have a shared universe, like, obviously not all of those were sequels, but it is kind of a good point of the illustration, that if you do have enough of them, they're probably not all going to be good.
Right. Like,
Whatever the fuck Ant-Man is doing.
Ant-Man's doing something. I still haven't seen either of the Ant-Man movies, and
That's fine.
yeah. But there's a really important end scene that I have to see. I could just look up on YouTube.
And it's something...
I find that the MCU drops the ball on the second movie a lot.
Yeah.
'Cause, like, Dark World wasn't...
I actually liked Dark World. I like that you started there, because that's the only one that I liked Phase 2 more than Phase 1, was for Thor.
Well, I feel like Thor's had a weird evolution, dude. Thor's had a weird evolution. I did like Dark World a lot. I know other people don't like Dark World, but, like, I enjoyed it. I mean, there's a lot more Loki in it, and I like Loki.
And Christopher Eccleston.
It's like, there's so many things happening. And there was, I mean, still, like, the weird romance thing going on, but it was...
Definitely less so than in Thor.
Yeah, definitely. It felt less forced than it was, like, in the first Thor movie. But then Iron Man 2 exists.
Iron Man 2 is weird.
I honestly don't remember it.
A lot of people really don't remember it all that well, which is fine. Objectively, it's better, because, Mickey Rourke was playing Cable, I think, is that right? Who was he playing?
Was he playing Cable?
He was playing, the point is, we don't remember, because it went so far past, the comic inspiration that you're like, what? Who
is happening?
So that was the thing that happened. It's also where Black Widow shows up in the MCU,
yeah.
but it was like the movie where she arguably now was the worst developed.
Yeah.
Arguably. But for a long time it was the one where she was worst developed, and it was where she showed up. And it was also, Iron Man was the only one to have 2 installations in Phase 1.
Yeah. Before the rest of the Avengers.
That happened also.
God, so much. There's so much going on in the NC. It's so hard to keep track of it.
Yeah.
It's like... Civil War definitely happened. Yeah. Civil War was definitely a movie. Man, they could have done so much better with, Civil War. Like, they shouldn't have used Civil War then.
Right.
They should have saved Civil War for more than just Bucky.
They also shouldn't have, and I understand that Civil War is a Captain America thing. That was, like, it's part of the comics. He's, like, a big part of the story. But just because of the large cast, they really shouldn't have marketed it as a Captain America film.
Because that's what it is now. It's the third Captain America movie.
And they tried too hard to try and work it into... Like, they tried too hard to make you sympathize with Steve.
Even though he was wrong!
He was wrong!
He was so wrong!
And it's like...
I saw a post on Tumblr, where it was, like, talking about how, like, Tony Stark, epitomizes, like, the worst things about, like, the top 1%.
Yeah.
And he's lauded as a hero for it, and it was, like, using examples, like, from Civil War, and I was like, listen, I'm not arguing that, yes, he is a playboy, billionaire, philanthropist, what's the other one? Genius. He's all those things. He is definitely part of the 1%, but you should not be using Civil War for this one.
No kidding.
Because, like, arguably, Tony's motivations were the least selfish in Civil War of every single movie. So yeah.
Yeah. And you can apply this to so many of the examples that I can think of are Harley keeps like elbowing me in the side.
Here, let's go ahead and we're gonna switch around movements real fast. He decided he wanted to be in Cat's corner because he's a boyo.
So yeah, that's a fun thing. I think trying not to do more horror stuff as examples. I think movie sequels where they're like you can tell when they're getting cash grabby. Action franchises are really bad about this because it's like action movies as a general rule. I'm not saying there aren't great action movies, but as a general rule, they tend to have less substance, and as they progress, they get worse and worse and worse. I really love Die Hard. Don't even want to watch the sequels ever again. Like, I've seen them, that's enough, that's fine.
Definitely, there's just nothing.
We'll watch Die Hard whenever, still.
Right. Anytime someone's like, you want to watch Die Hard? I'm like, oh, yes. Weird thing, we watch Die Hard every Christmas. That's our Christmas movie, you know this. But, like, the version they have on Amazon now, or wherever we rented from, is like the cut version. So it doesn't have the scene where he's walking across the glass. And I was like very confused for the longest time because like we were like watching it, all of a sudden it like cut, and I was like, and it's done this like every year. It's like I don't remember when I asked about it, but I was like, isn't there a scene where he walks across glass, or did I hallucinate that? But no, Die Hard's good.
Was it Netflix? Because Netflix is always cropping weird sections out of Christmas movies.
It's not Netflix because we don't watch it on Netflix. I feel like we rent it every Christmas. You should just watch it on Netflix.
I know that Die Hard is on Netflix, and I also know because it was like it was like the Muppet Christmas Carol. They just like took out a bunch of the songs for no reason. Not all of the songs. Just some of them, and I was like, that's weird.
That's so weird. Why is Netflix like this?
But anyway, that's kind of the movie thing. I think for books, and this is something we'll get into a little bit more when we go genre by genre. Like Alan was saying, I do think for the most part, book sequels are better received, and it's because a lot of the time they're planned.
Right. There's not a lot of, they're not as easily greenlit as a movie is.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things is a book can't be greenlit to be published until it's finished.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I'm sure you're the author. Is there, like, anything that, like, will a publisher ever, like, help an author if, like, if the publisher wants a sequel to the book, will they ever, like, pay the author in advance? Or
yeah, they're, like, the way that contracts work is very complicated. But what happens, and what's really annoying to fans, I imagine, of obscure literature, is that you always get a deal for the first one first, but then you can, like, I'm not going to say every time, but in, like, 95% of all cases, you get a publishing deal for the first one first, and then you pick up a contract for the other installations.
Okay.
So
usually it's like a secondary. So, but it takes more time.
Yeah.
So, unlike a movie studio, which is like, this movie did really well, we're immediately going to greenlit, like, 3 more.
It's kind of, it's pretty much like that. You can submit specifically for contract, specifically for series contracts, but that's something, if it's your first book, your chances of getting one of those contracts is, like, insignificantly low.
Right, you might, if you're a miracle worker, maybe, but, are you a miracle worker, though?
I'm not. No.
You're here to hear first.
And I do think it's one of the reasons why I I think it's one of the reasons why books are so good, like series books, because if you want a book to do well, it has to be complete enough of a story that people will be interested in it if you want it to be a full series.
Right.
Whereas, that happens less in movies. It's one of those things that has to tell a story. It has to make money on its own, like the first installation does.
Right.
But you get deals for so many movies following that,
right.
that it's less about...
And I think it's one of those things where people have... Going to see a movie sequel is less of a time commitment than reading a book sequel is.
Yeah.
Like, even listening to, like, an audiobook is more of a time commitment than going to see a 1.5 hour movie or 2 hour movie. Like, versus, like, 8 hours to however long the fucking book is.
Yeah. The Game of Thrones audiobooks, the shortest one, I think is like 28 hours.
Jesus Christ.
As an audiobook.
I'm gonna start putting these on at work. I'm gonna make all the dogs listen to them.
Good.
Is that... This is a good plan.
Yeah.
I'm sure I won't miss anything.
But, like, even shorter books are... Like, The Alchemist, I think the audiobook is still, like, 3 hours. And that's, like, one of the shortest...
One of the shortest ones.
Classics that you can read.
So, yeah, I think it is an entirely different beast for a thing. I don't even know how video game sequels work. Like, I don't know if those are all I have to assume they don't greenlight multiple sequels for games. I have to assume that's how it is.
I don't think I've ever heard of that happening. I don't know a ton about the game industry. Yeah. So I'm not going to say that definitively.
Neither of us know about the game industry.
I've never heard of... I've never seen the headline, AAA title picked up for 5 more installations. Like,
I just almost died hearing those words.
What did I read the other day? Venom got picked up for 3 more Venom movies, and it's like, we don't even know how Venom did yet.
We don't even know how Venom
Calm
did yet.
down.
What the fuck? Also, does anyone want 3 more Venom movies?
They signed on for it.
But...
3 more Venom movies.
What? 3 more Venom movies? I mean, I want to know how the first Venom movie is, but I like Venom as a villain. 4 villain movies seems like a lot, don't you think?
I would think so, but...
How would they greenlight movies that haven't come out yet? And this is why Hollywood's a mess. This is exactly what we're talking... Like, what's going on? Also, what the MCU is doing so much.
That, and also they're like, hey, our last big movie for this famous series didn't go well. What if we cast an actor who's either really loved or really hated in the next one? Not that I'm bitter.
You are.
Matt Smith has been announced for episode 9.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, no, Cat.
I know.
Oh, no, Cat.
I know.
Oh, no.
I know. It's bad.
So that's an interesting one also to talk about while we're in the movie genre. Star Wars is a thing that exists.
Oh, I have a Star Wars quote.
Oh, you do? You can't unlock my
iPad.
It requires skill.
Nice. Or a fingerprint.
Shush. Skill.
Yeah, do you want to read for Mickey?
For Mickey? What? Just read that. Just read it.
Yeah, just read, like, the line.
Mickey. Empire Strikes Back. Better story, improved effects.
Not a sequel, part of a trilogy, completely planned.
Right.
Star Wars is an interesting franchise. That was also Randy Meeks.
Yeah, I was gonna
Scream
say.
2.
I was gonna say, there's names here.
Because
what is this?
Randy Meeks' whole thing when he's talking about sequels is that they're worse than the original.
Right.
Which is ironic considering that Scream 2, better
than the original.
But as he's trying to explain all of this I think this is the conversation that he has in the class. But as he's trying to explain his sequel thing, he's like going off on a rant to prove which sequels are worse than the original story and why. And someone points out that Empire Strikes Back is better than A New Hope, and that's like a widely held belief for all Star Wars fans. Randy points out it's not a sequel, it was part of a trilogy.
Right.
And that's kind of the thing, is that film trilogies they technically are sequels, but they have...
There's a different breed of sequels.
Yeah. It's like a different subcategory. And Star Wars, if you want to look at the original trilogy, was very good about making sequels that improved upon the story. They added things. They brought back classic elements without just, like, using cheap tricks.
Mm-hmm.
It was good. The original trilogy was really good. And then you get into the whole prequel-sequel fiasco.
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck's going on with Star Wars. I'm gonna be honest, I have not watched Star Wars in a long time. Because, like, I watched them all when I was younger, and then, like, I never found a reason to watch them again. I watched them, and that was it. So, like, it's so weird, because, like, so... It's a widely held Star Wars opinion that the trilogy is better than everything else. It's the top tier.
Side note, this is a belief that so much of the Star Wars community has. I'm a big believer in that. All of the Star Wars fans that I know personally either prefer the worst prequels or the new series that's coming out right now.
Huh.
Like, I hate that.
Yeah, once again with the unpopular opinion.
I'm in the right, though. Like, I agree with the majority of the fandom. It's just the Star Wars
people
fans I know personally. I'm the
have the unpopular opinion. But so, and then the prequels happened, which were like, I was too young to understand what I was watching when I was watching the prequels. Anakin was definitely a character that was like there. That's all I remember. And then I haven't seen any of the new ones. I saw Rogue One, which is not even, like, it chronologically with the new series. And I was like, huh? So, Star Wars is so weird.
Yeah.
Because it has 3 parts that are all still, they're very clearly divided in 3 parts.
Yes.
There's the original trilogy, the prequels, and then the new stuff that's coming out.
Right.
Rogue One and Solo are in there somewhere. I don't know what the fuck happened with Solo. That's
fair.
But I guess those technically fall into the new reboot, not the reboot, but the new movies. And they're all still part of the same universe, chronologically, part of the same universe, part of the same story-ish.
Yeah.
But, like, they're so vastly different. It's almost like they're 3 different movie franchises in themselves.
Yeah.
That's how different they are.
They are very, very different. A big part of this, I want to blame... no one can... There's too much blame to go around for the prequels. But looking at... I would have liked if the original series if the original trilogy had been emulated more.
Yeah.
In the new ones. Instead of... Like, there were a lot of callbacks, but they were done very cheaply instead of trying to imitate the style.
Right.
You know? And there was that whole thing where it's like, the new ones are really good because they do diversify the cast some and whatever. But there were ways to do that and still get the feel of the original trilogy. Like, my problem isn't that there's a diverse cast or that there are female stormtroopers. Although the Clone Wars gets very confusing when you have a bunch of women in there. But that's not my problem. It was like the tone of the movie should have been more congruent.
The problem was the Clone Wars. The Clone Wars was a movie that existed.
Some big problem.
The Attack of the Clones, like, just... Who the fuck knows?
So, what I will blame the new ones on is J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because he can't keep a consistent tone.
Yeah.
And he doesn't understand speculative science scaling at all.
He should maybe be kept away with anything from anything with star in the name.
Yes.
If I had to throw in my 2 cents there.
Yeah.
Correct. But yeah, it's just, those are like, you could do a whole podcast, like a whole multi-episode podcast on, and I'm sure they do, on all the Star Wars sequel shenanigans.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because Jesus Christ. The fuck is
But
that?
you know when it needed to fix it is Matt Smith.
Did it need Matt Smith?
Really does not need Matt Smith. I feel so bad, because, like, The Last Jedi, I watched it, but I didn't retain it. It was like, I went home and I didn't really remember what I had seen.
Whoops.
Because I kind of dissociate from franchises.
Yeah.
Where it's like, past a certain point, if a series screws up enough, I can't register it anymore.
Right.
That's like the best way that I can think. It's what happened with Doctor Who after Matt Smith was there. So, not looking forward to the new Star Wars.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Because there was just, and it's not like, and Doctor Who's kind of a good example because I really liked the Doctor after him. I really liked Capaldi, but I had already, like, mentally distanced myself so far to be able to make it through the Matt Smith seasons that I just wasn't able to re-engage. And it's what happened with The Last Jedi, because Force Awakens just, like, it shattered my suspension of disbelief and was, like, trying to glue the pieces together with, like, bad plot twists, and I'm like, I can't anymore.
Can't do that one.
And then, like, The Last Jedi was better than Force Awakens, but I went in so not invested.
Right, you were already not there. And I think that's one of the things that, like, when you do that, when you have a sequel that just fucks it up, like, real bad, like, going back into it is, like, not, it's so hard, because, like,
it's hard to re-engage people at that point.
It's the sort of thing, doing anything that really puts you in trouble, like, story-wise or quality-wise, you have a hard time getting your audience back.
And I feel really bad. I really liked Into Darkness as a film experience, but it also kind of did that thing where it skewed my perception of how the world functioned to the point that I couldn't enjoy Beyond.
I never even got to watch Beyond.
Arguably, better movie, but, like, it just...
It's one of those weird things that I didn't think about till I was older and more familiar with Star Trek, that what a weird decision to have the Federation be like, we're doing all this war shit now. It's like, I thought the point was that we went, the entire point of the other... Are we good?
Yeah.
Star Trek. J.J. Abrams needs to stop touching things with star in the name.
I would really like that. Actually, if J.J. Abrams would, like, stop touching stuff, that'd be great.
God, what an absolute... that's a fun one to talk about. But going back to the Cloverfield paradox is a thing that exists.
Yeah, Cloverfield paradox is, in fact, a thing that exists.
Definitely happened.
It's not, like, a sequel. It's like a shared universe.
Yeah, that's what I sort of gathered from what I'd heard about it.
But also it's bad. Which is also how I felt about 10 Cloverfield Lane. 10 Cloverfield Lane had so much potential, and it was, like, so close to being good, but it just missed... like,
enough.
Just enough that you don't feel good at the end of it.
So you're like,
It's like none of the problems were that bad, but I was let down at the end.
Right.
That's not the feeling I want to walk away with. But yeah.
Yeah.
One other sequel that I want to talk about is kind of a weird one, and it's why I want to talk about it. I want to talk about Epitaph Part 2.
Huh. You're on your own, buddy.
Like a real cheery, fun time.
It's called Epitaph.
Epitaph Part 2. What? So.
Hold on, I forgot to write more on my epitaph. Wait.
That's kind of it, honestly.
No.
No. For those of you who and the reason I wanted to talk about it is because their television doesn't really do sequels. It has seasons. Right. For the most part. It has, like, seasons and spin-offs, with the exception of Epitaph Part 2. For those of you who don't know, it was the final, that's the name of the last episode of Dollhouse. And the reason why it's a sequel and not just a series finale is because of Joss Whedon getting fucked over by the studio.
Yeah.
So, pretty much what happens is, because they told him at the end of season 1 he wasn't getting a season 2.
Right.
So he did a story, that, like, in the future that wrapped up the world the way that he wanted to wrap it up. And it was called Epitaph, and it was great. And then he got a second season, so he had to jump back to the original timeline. And they pretty much told him at the beginning of the season, you're not getting a season 3, so, like, go big. Because you're going home, regardless.
Right.
So, like, so the series finale for Dollhouse, even though, and I don't know exactly how many episodes season 2 had. I think it was like 13 or 12 or
I feel like it was 13 or 12.
But like the first 11 continued the story, bridging the gap between where the penultimate episode of season 1 ended and Epitaph. It was like gearing in that direction. And then the series finale is Epitaph Part 2, where it just continues the story, and it's like I almost think of it as like a movie continuation, because it's so set apart from the rest of the story.
Right.
And it was a very unique experience, because that's not traditionally how television works.
That's true. So the ideal way to watch it is to watch season 1 except for Epitaph, then season 2
except for Epitaph Part 2.
And then, or to Epitaph, and then Epitaph Part 2.
That's how I watch Dollhouse, when I, like, go back to rewatch it.
That's so much fucking work.
It's a lot of work. But if you watch Epitaph and Epitaph Part 2, it does seem almost like a movie, but they do tell, like, because that's, like, about the runtime of a movie, and it tells a complete story by itself, but you really do get that sequel feeling when you're watching it. You know?
Like, it was made to build upon the story of that particular episode.
Yeah.
So
it's, like, the one example that I have of, like, television sequels.
Yeah.
And it's really, and it's a feeling you kind of get, like, when a show gets rebooted after a long time, where it feels like a sequel.
Right.
And Epitaph is kind of, I would say, like that. Except for it, and it, you know what, it really is good. Mm-hmm. It could have been done a lot better, but that's a good example of making the best of a situation that you don't like.
Not working.
Because season 2 of Dollhouse was like, there were a lot of problems with it, but arguably it was better. Like, a lot of the best standalone episodes were there. And Epitaph Part 2, I'm bitter about because they killed off a lot of people that I would have liked to see not get killed off.
I can't imagine which one that is.
But there's more than one.
I know.
But
lot. I know the one.
The one specifically, who survived Epitaph.
Of course.
But not Part 2.
So, oh, fuck that.
But yeah, it was good. It was like a good execution, and it's just like one of those interesting, here's a sequel scenario.
Here's a sequel scenario that you won't see ever again. Once in a lifetime, folks. Never again. Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, with the opposite situation, where, with, unfortunately, Madoka Rebellion, so what happened was, they did the series, and then they turned the Madoka series into 2 movies. So there's the anime, then there's the movies, and then Rebellion is technically the 3rd sequel for the movies. It's a sequel to the movies. And it's weird. It's weird because what a weird thing to do is to have the whole series, and then instead of just doing one movie, making 2 movies of the thing that already exists.
Yeah.
Because at that point it's an adaptation still, but it's like, it was done so close together, it was like, huh? Why though? Fuck Rebellion. We're back to this point.
Yeah. There's also, speaking of, like, Rebellion and fan participation, maybe, that's also something that's a really interesting thing, is, like, when you get something that's not a traditional sequel, but the story gets continued and picked up in a different format.
Yeah.
That's also a thing that Joss Whedon did a lot of.
Yeah, I was gonna say he was...
Because Serenity happened.
Right.
That was a thing. Because Firefly, if you can imagine, got fucked over by the studio.
That's probably the worst example of it I've ever seen.
And then also, like, Buffy Season 8 was a thing. It was a comic.
I thought we didn't talk about it, though.
Well, it's a good example of, like, a very non-traditional sequeling format.
Non-traditional. And bad.
Dawn was a giant.
I hate that.
But yeah.
That's where we are.
Wanna move on to genre?
Yeah.
Do you have other format things?
So, definitely, so, comics can have sequels.
Mm-hmm.
It's a similar thing to television where, like, a lot of the time, comics are sort of their own thing. So, serialized comics are definitely their own thing, which is, where, this is, like, the issue format, where it's done in serialized installments, that you can pick it up and read the chapter or issue on its own, mm-hmm. and then you can either continue it or you can leave it as it is. So, like I said earlier, there's the arc system, which is sort of what gets sequels.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, there's lots of, like, in the comic Marvelverse, there's, like, a bunch of shit going on, like, there's a bunch of different things, and, like, you sort of have to keep track of which version of everything you're reading, because there's a lot, like, there's different universes. I mean, that's the whole multiverse thing, and so there's a whole bunch of multiverse stuff, and it's like, but the multiverse is, when something is a multiverse, it's not connected. Like, it's an AU. It's an alternate universe. That's the whole point of it. So, those are not sequels, as they are just reimagining or theoretical of the original material. So, those aren't technically sequels. There's the Death of Superman, and Rebirth of Superman thing, which I think the Death of Superman was its own thing, and then, like, the whatever the fuck happened in that next arc, where there were all the different Supermans and they were all doing everything, and then Superman came back to life. That's an example of a direct sequel.
Yeah.
Like, because those two things were intrinsically connected. Mm-hmm. When it comes to graphic novels, they're more their standalone things, which can lead to sequels, and stuff like that, because it is a novel. Mm-hmm. So that's more subject to the general book guidelines of making a sequel. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and then there's, like, webcomics that, like, update, like, by the page or whatever, and it's like, until that thing is totally finished, that's not gonna have a sequel. Mm-hmm. I think the thing about comics is they're always a lot of them are very long, because they run for a long time, and so, like, you can have 900 chapters of something, but it'll still all be the same series until initial thing comes to a close.
Right.
So, like, Naruto went on for fucking at least 900 chapters or something like that, and then it was like, that's over. Now we're doing Naruto Part 2, and it was like, hold on! Who's this child? Who let him procreate? Stop that.
That's fair.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Nice.
So that's sort of the comic book genre of things, because it's like, you have to go through the publishing stuff if you're going to do a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, it's all up to publishers how long you're going to run as a thing. Like, if you have a publishing agency and they're sticking with you and you're getting good reviews, you're good to keep going. But if you're not, if you don't keep up the quality, if you're not improving the quality, keeping up quality, and keeping people interested, then you probably won't even get to your second arc.
Yeah.
I'd say probably for comic books, it's good not even to plan like a second arc ever. I mean that's sort of how I feel about doing a thing in general. Is you have to make sure that if you're doing a thing you want to be multi-part, you need to make sure that your first installment is good enough that other people will care about it enough to want more. So I think it's very important that even if you don't get picked up, your first thing is good enough to stand on its own.
Yeah.
Like, leave it... Like, Harry Potter's a good one for it. Because it was intended to be a series from the start, right?
Yes. But if you... And by the time Chamber of Secrets rolled around, Sorcerer's Stone or Philosopher's Stone was popular enough that...
Right.
It was pretty clear it was going to get the full series.
Right.
But
you can just watch.
So by the time you get to Chamber of Secrets, because it had already been picked up for multiple books at that point, Chamber of Secrets is another part, is like the first one that feels like a part of a story. You could read Sorcerer's Stone and that would be a full thing on its own.
Yeah, it's like a full wrapped up thing. It's like, because in the end, Voldemort is sufficiently dealt with. The characters resolve their things. Gryffindor wins.
Yeah. And even I said Chamber of Secrets, but
I'd almost even say Azkaban sort of is where
Azkaban does feel more like a part of something, for sure, because by the time you make it to the third one, you kind of know that something bigger is happening in the world.
Right.
And you want to see Harry get through all the years of school. But 1 and 2 were fairly self-contained.
Right. They could be done and enjoyed just on their own.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's also a really interesting one that... because there were multiple things planned, which is good to do if your ultimate goal is to have a series. Be adaptable, though.
Yeah.
This is something that I really think there should have been 8 Harry Potter books.
Yeah.
Just because the whole reason that we were expecting 7 was because there were going to be 7 years at Hogwarts. And Harry doesn't go back to Hogwarts for Deathly Hallows. He goes on a quest to save the world.
Right.
Pretty much. In the last book, which is fine. Like, I like that it deterred, but because we weren't held to that 7-year structure of finishing school, too much happened in Deathly Hallows. It was, like, notably the longest book by several hundred pages, and not several hundred, but I think it's, like, over 300 pages longer than Half-Blood Prince.
Yeah.
And so much, it felt so rushed anyway, because he still has to find, like, 4 Horcruxes, and then get to Voldemort, and take over the school, and, like, it was too many things, and it's like, at that point, it almost would have been better. And she had been saying 7 books, I think, even knowing that he wasn't going to finish out his time at Hogwarts.
Right, of course.
But I think it would have been better at that point to say it's actually 8 books, you know?
Right.
And had it... the story would have had to change significantly for it to work, but I think slowing down that pacing...
Yeah, I think I would have liked that more.
Better than sticking to 7 just because she'd already promised 7.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things where splitting it up into 2 things was, I mean, definitely part of it was cash grab.
Yeah.
Because more movies, more money. But I think it was actually, like, a very good decision.
Yeah.
Because so much happened.
And there were...
all the time.
Like, there were rumors also about doing that for Goblet of Fire,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of movies, which I think would have been good. As a book, Goblet of Fire is
Yeah.
the best one. Like, I wouldn't mess with it, but...
Yeah, there was a
As
lot
a movie.
going on.
Because that was the one that felt rushed. And for the most part, I really don't like it when movie studios break stuff up into 2 parts. But
Mhm.
Deathly Hallows was one that needed it.
Yeah.
And it benefited from it.
It was one of those things where it started this unfortunate trend of doing part 1 and part 2
Yeah.
of things. Because, like, several other movie series have done it, and they just didn't need to.
Yeah.
Twilight.
Hunger Games.
Like, so many things. Infinity War was one of those ones that it was, like, definitely needed it, but it stands alone well enough on its own.
Right.
Like, and clearly, if we're gonna be sitting through another 2.5 hour movie, I would rather do that
Yeah.
than sit through, like, a 3-hour movie and have everything be rushed and confusing.
One thing that we didn't need sequels for was The Hobbit, also.
Yeah, no, why?
Should have been one movie.
Yeah, it could have easily been one movie.
Should not have had Legolas in it.
Why was Legolas there?
It was Legolas fanfiction.
Why? Who asked for that? There's plenty of it online!
Not enough.
That's one thing I've been doing with the dogs. There's one that stands on his back legs, and I just always ask him, what do your elf eyes see? Because that's all he does all day. But yeah, so, no, why would they do that? Why did they do that? I never even got to watch them. I was so uninterested in it. I never got to see the dragon.
Sexy, sexy dragon voice.
Okay, you're getting dangerous. You're getting dangerously close to furry territory. You gotta roll it back.
Is it scaly if it's a dragon?
Scaly if it's a dragon, yes, because it's a reptile. Roll it back. That's my domain. Fucker.
He's voiced by Benedict Cumberbatch.
I know, cat. I know.
That's how the Targaryens happened. The first
We
dragon
are
Benedict Cumberbatch.
moving on.